Hi everyone, welcome. It is wonderful to see you here. This is the opening event of our Diversity and Allyship Week. We have a great series of events this week, and I am delighted to have Elena Richards in our opening event, Chief Diversity Officer of KPMG in George Talk Business, and our Dean Anuj Mehrotra will be moderating the event. This is a great opportunity for us to learn from the experiences and views of Elena, a great corporate leader in this area. Like you, I am looking forward to hearing from her. And as you know, our opening remarks, welcoming remarks will be by Caroline Leguer-Brown. She's the Vice Provost of Diversity, Equity, and Community Engagement, who is at the helm of all that happens in University on DEI. So I'll be looking forward to hearing from her as well. Before I give the floor to her, I again welcome you. This is really an event which brings all of us together, which helps us move in our journey to diversity, equity, inclusion, and very importantly, the allyship. We have really great series of events. Today, I am delighted that KPMG partnered with us to have this great event that we will really hear and learn more about how a corporation goes about this and how her leadership shapes this. And as you know, in the afternoon, we have intercultural skills panel, followed by tomorrow fireside chat on inclusion and allyship. And on Wednesday, Blacks at Microsoft. On Thursday, we have a recruitment breakfast. And we will finish with industry roundtables. We have a great series of events, and I think at the end of this week, we will be at a better place in this journey. We will be at an elevated place in fostering inclusion and allyship in our community. And this is really thanks to all of you here. It is just not one person's or one group's event. This is everybody had put their hearts and minds and passions into this, because all of us want to be a partner in this journey. We all want to be at a better place in fostering this community and be a stronger community with it. So I'm really looking forward to seeing all of you in all these great events, and I am very delighted to have Elena here, and I would like to now leave the floor to Caroline for her welcoming remarks. Welcome again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Agsa and Dean Mehrotra. As you heard, I'm Carolyn Leguer-Brown, and I currently serve as the Vice Provost for Diversity, Equity, and Community Engagement here at GW. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to George Talks Business, featuring Elena Richards, Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at KPMG. I bring you warm greetings from President Wrighton and Provost Bracey and our entire team at GW's Office for Diversity, Equity, and Community Engagement. This afternoon's program, as you heard, is part of GW School of Business Diversity and Allyship Week activities. Through a series of keynote speakers, panel discussions, network activities, and more, we will be exploring the importance of diversity and allyship in business and how we can all work together to promote and support outstanding and truly distinctive work environments for all. Diversity and allyship are crucial in our everyday lives, and they are particularly important in the business world. This week, we will be celebrating and educating ourselves on the rich tapestry of cultures, perspectives, and experiences that make our school, our university, and our world a better place. Events like these can help us to obtain the tools that we need to operationalize our commitments to diversity and allyship in real-world settings. The potential benefits include improved decision-making and better outcomes, enhanced brand reputation, increased creativity and innovation, improved employee engagement and retention, which is really important in a post-pandemic era, and finally, and perhaps most importantly, better alignment with societal values. A commitment to diversity and allyship is increasingly seen as a societal value and perhaps as a moral obligation as well. By prioritizing these principles, future business leaders can help to align the work of their companies with the values and expectations of our broader community. So let's embrace this opportunity to learn from each other, to grow together, and to make a positive impact. My sincere thanks to my colleagues at the GW School of Business for your ongoing commitment to DEI work and for planning this week's events. Thank you, Elena Richards, for taking the time to be with us here today to share your valuable expertise and your perspective. And to all the people who are in attendance here today, thank you so much for engaging in this important discussion. I wish all of you a productive and meaningful Diversity and Allyship Week at the GW School of Business. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carolyn, and good afternoon, everybody. I am Anuj Mehrotra. I am the Dean of the School of Business, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all and those of you who are joining us online to this George Talks Business session today. Before I begin, I know many in our community are from the region that has been impacted by the earthquake, and I hope that your families and your loved ones are safe there. Thank you, Elena, for joining us today. I think I'm going to have a fantastic time, and I'm hoping that not only our students, staff, and faculty are going to have an educational experience today, but I'm looking forward to learning more myself from you. This, I must say, in addition to the GW School of Business Diversity Council and KPMG, I do want to call out GW Women in Business, who have been partners for today's event here. So thank you very much as well. So welcome.
Thank you.
And let me start by first asking about your own journey, a little bit about your own journey on what has led you to be in this position and what has prepared you to be in this position as Chief Diversity and Equity and Inclusion Officer at KPMG.
I appreciate the opportunity to be with you all this afternoon. And my journey started, I would say, by way of my parents that were born on a little island called Saint Martin in the French West Indies and immigrated to this country in 1969, where they had my brother, my sister, and I. And growing up, we lived in Staten Island, New York, where most would appreciate on the East Coast. And growing up, one of the things that my parents did not do was speak French to me. So St. Martin's a French and Dutch island. Part of the island they speak French, the other part they speak Dutch. And that was one thing I regret growing up, because when you go home, when your parents are one of 12 and one of 8, you would hope to be able to communicate with your family. But my parents felt that that would be one extra thing to set us apart, because of the color of our skin. My schools in Staten Island were mostly white, and so growing up, they didn't want there to be one other thing to set us apart. And so that is something that I would say is even part of my journey, because still, for spring break, we'll go home this year, and that is a part or aspect of my identity that I have not been able to groom or build and really communicate with family members. But they all speak English, and so we do communicate, but that would be one other way. And Lord knows, before I leave this earth, that is something that's on my bucket list. I grew up, I went to SUNY Albany, so upstate New York, and then when I started work, I was a professional development specialist for an organization called Inroads, which was that placed talented minority youth in organizations and companies like the one that I work for today. And so part of that is I brought diversity then to a former employer where I was in professional services. And by bringing diversity into the work, I started as a resource manager. So I did HR and diversity placement in the audit practice. And so I would say that 2020 was a very impactful time for many of us. We were all experiencing COVID and living life in these little boxes on our screens at home. Some of you as students were probably either in high school or potentially some of you may have even started college. But it was a life lesson where we were living and thinking that you can separate work and life and it's never away, right? As we digested all of what was happening with George Floyd. It wasn't that there weren't other George Floyd moments, but this is one that the globe could not ignore. And it was a time and a moment when I reevaluated for myself whether or not I wanted to be part of something bigger. And the leadership at KPMG, led by Paul Cannot, made it his legacy. He wanted to be or do better as it relates to Black talent. And so he coined the term Accelerate 2025, which is an aspiration for the firm to be the employer choice for Black talent. And so that called me as a Black woman growing up from immigrant parents and wanting to, make dreams possible. I thought about what I was doing, and I wanted to be a part of something bigger. And so I decided to move and join this wonderful organization where they are focused on making meaningful change when it comes to Black talent. And so that doesn't mean that it's at the expense of any other underrepresented group. It only means that we, as a nation, have to do more as it relates to Black talent. And so that is my journey. I am also a proud mother of a 14-year-old daughter who teaches me something new each and every day.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that, Elena. You mentioned that this focus, so every CEO that I had been talking to particularly in the last couple of years, DEI issues are on top of mind for them. So the question I have is this focus really, this is significant focus that companies are putting in and the corporate world is putting it. Is it something which is there to stay, or is it because of recent times? What is the business case for it to be staying as important and significant?
I think it has become way more significant as a result of us all experiencing George Floyd at a time. And I hope that it's created a sense of urgency. Now, I want it to be the lasting urgency for us to continue to move forward, because we all have, and no one can say that they have written the ticket to say they know the one thing to do. There are so many things that we need to do. And so that's what I hope that we take away from the unfortunate death and murder of George Floyd, but it can't be the only thing. And so with that as the backdrop, what is it that we are going to do as organizations, and CEOs being the lead for their organizations pushing forward is the only way. Business has to be involved in this, as does colleges and universities, nonprofits. We all have to work at this, and why I think it's really important when we think about ESG, it is a part of its S in social. What are we all gonna do to make this better when we think about some of what we need to do for Black talent? And so parts of that means, what are you thinking about in where you show up in the world? And so I can talk a little bit more about that, but I think it's really important for us to really level set, and this can't be the one and done effort.
Sure, so let's change, we'll come back to this, but let's change it a little bit and say, let's talk about diversity and intersection with identity. From your lens, what are the various aspects of diversity that you are experiencing as a Chief Diversity Officer, for example? And is there a dimension of diversity which is particularly challenging for you to be able to handle?
I would say, as a diversity leader, I continue to learn each and every day. And so many would think that you have all of the answers, and I don't. So I will humbly share that I am evolving after 25 years in this work. That diversity has changed. I continue to say it's the gift that keeps on giving, and most days I wish it would give a little less, right? When you think about the world that we live in, when we wake up each and every day, some segment of our population and the people that we love and care about are at risk. And so I would hope that as we think about what we want to do, first and foremost is, how are we better humans to each other? How do we think about being kind? How do we bring that to the aspect of some of this work? So that would be my hope, and parts of my identity that I can't not see, right? I talked a little bit about being an immigrant parent, so that is part of my identity. West Indian family, first generation college. When you think about being a single mom, I'm divorced of 8 years. When you think about corporate world in general, those are all the various dimensions of diversity. There are over 36 different dimensions, and at the core of that is our identity. And so Garden, Schwartz, and Rowe They have a diversity wheel. Some of you may have seen that. But all of those aspects, when you think about at any given moment or any given day, which ones are most important to you? So this morning, single mom, I had a 14-year-old that doesn't want to go to school today. She's not feeling the greatest. But how are you thinking about what that means when I show up at work, right? And so you can't ignore those parts of what's going on in your life when you show up. And so I think COVID actually gave us a really good education of that. And then as we think about what that means in the ways that we connect through campus, online, virtually, it's evolving. So that's the parts of our identity and parts of this work that's still evolving. It's probably my long way of saying that.
No, right, and then I think it's a very important point as well, and you talk about the self-identity, and I think there's a campaign at KPMG for the self-identity. How did you implement it? What were some of the outcomes you found from it?
Yeah, I would say that that's the interesting journey that we're all on in learning, right? Because historically, when you think about some of the underrepresented groups, you think about race, you think about gender, you think about sexual orientation. But how they intersect is something that we also have to understand and appreciate. There are other dimensions of who we are. We're looking at, obviously, the first generation college, first generation workforce. What are we thinking about when it comes to religion? So those are all areas of our identities that I want our organization for people to trust us enough to tell us a little bit more. And then you think about multiracial, multi-ethnic, right? So there's other ways that people identify. And I want to make sure when we are building this wonderful organization and the culture that we want everyone to consume on a day-to-day basis, that we're doing that in the most equitable way possible. And the only way to do that is for our people to tell us more about themselves, to trust us enough to share more about what does this mean for me when I come to KPMG. And so that's the journey we're on. I can't say that we've arrived. We're working on it each and every day, and I have wonderful partners and staff that are helping me do that because that's part of our strategy.
So, this leads me to ask another question. A lot of folks in academia and the corporate world, when we talk about implementing these inclusion kind of initiatives, often some people may actually think that this is customizing the work environment to a point where it may lead to lack of profitability. What is your opinion on that? What is the business case for making this also an imperative, not just a moral case and not just the part about why this feels right?
I would say that people are going to come and be motivated for whatever reason. It's either your heart, your head, or your wallet. And so the way I want people to think about it is all aspects of who I am help you get the best product, help reach the right solutions. All of our lived experiences make us who we are. And you don't want only parts of that, you want all of it. And so if we think about self-ID, that helps us bring more of that to the workplace. And so that's part of why you need to know more about me, because then you'll get the best out of me. And then you'll get the best out of me wanting to do more for your organization. And so I think it's all part and parcel to when we think about inclusion, it's not only, some have coined it, do you want to get invited to the party, come join an organization. But when you truly are at your best is when you're invited to dance. And so how do we get invited, but also be able to dance? And so that's part of the work is how do you make all of these different aspects of who we are truly flourish in a way that's going to be meaningful.
So that's an excellent point. You're talking about we are the best when we are invited in that sense. Many of our students who are graduating may have self-identities which are very important from a perspective of being able to contribute in ways richer than what a resume might show. What is your recommendation? Should they include those aspects of self-identity on their resume or on their cover letters? Is the corporate world actually ready for that, or can it backfire on them? Especially, I'm thinking about how a lot of resumes and interviews even are parsed through artificial intelligence, which has its own biases. So I'm wondering how much of that information should students who are graduating and looking for jobs should be included on their resumes or cover letters, and whether that will be favorable or unfavorable for them. What would your advice be?
My advice would be to share as much about yourself and what you want to portray in your resume. And so resumes are now just a microcosm of questions that you enter on a website, right? Because you may not ever get your whole resume. It could be questions that they populate and ask you to respond to. But I would say people are putting pictures on resumes. There's a variety of ways on ways you want to describe and tell your story. You want to be able to get an interview and talk about how that makes you who you are. So that's still evolving. I'm not sure we know the answers to how people are using those tools. Obviously, because of the scale and the number of resumes, there's got to be ways to do that. So I would say if there are aspects of your identity, the fact that you speak multiple language, use that to your advantage, right? Bring it in.
Absolutely.
I wish I could say that I spoke French on my resume.
So following up on that, on the dimensions.
But I did add that I spoke Spanish. So I studied Spanish in school, and that was something that I absolutely included.
Wonderful.
Right.
So let me ask you, on following up on that, on the dimensions of diversity, when you're looking at that, and you mentioned that the work is not complete, not at KPMG, not at any corporation, not in any academic setting. As we are looking for ways to be able to enhance the work environment to create that maximum productivity possible, companies may be lacking in some ways to be in a position to provide that work environment for a variety of reasons as we are learning more and more about such dimensions. So my question is, if companies are unable to provide that, or if academia is unable to provide that work environment for that maximum productivity, should that be then considered for performance evaluation? Said that should we be making some kind of room there for performance? And I'll ask you from this perspective, looking at it from a professorial perspective here, if we are unable to, for example, provide that work environment or that testing environment for students in a way where the exam was not worded correctly, or it distracted them for some reason, should that be part and parcel of us figuring out what the grade should be adjusted?
I'm not sure of what the accommodation could be, but that's part of what we need to understand, right? So when we are testing for or having someone apply, you want to make sure that if they need an accommodation of sorts, or if they need a device to figure out something on the computer, or whatever the need might be, and again, we're only as good as what information is shared. So that's also part of the trust. And if you have that, then how do you need that to perform your job? And so I would say, answer it that way, right? If there is an accommodation, how do you let the recruiter and the interviewers know that you need something to complete it? And I think we've provided the tools to make that a little bit easier. As far as performance involved, our employees have the ability to ask us. There's definitely bots now that you can tell us, ask HR what accommodation you might need, as well as your HR person and your teams. But that is only as much as one is willing to share, because that's also part of the self-ID campaign. Not many are comfortable also sharing if there is a need, right? And so that's the trust factor that I talked about, and why we want people to tell us, because we want you to know that if you trust us with the information, it will be managed in the right way and used in a way that's going to help you be successful. And how do we surround you with that support? If you think about it, how are we protecting our most vulnerable population? So part of that is trust us to do the right thing with it.
Yeah. And you mentioned a very important part, which is trust. And in particular, when we start looking at mental well-being, mental health, those are some of the issues that people don't like to be able to divulge.
Right.
So how, as leadership, how do we create that and break that barrier down where people are in a position to share that information? And I would love to hear your thoughts on the connection between DEI and mental health.
Yeah, I think it's a part that we have to destigmatize and make sure that people are more willing to share what they need. And so, in whatever that need is, I can't pretend to know all aspects of what that is for each individual person. But I want to make sure that we're creating an environment where people feel like they can ask for what they need, that teams are connected. And I was at our offices earlier today. I want to be able for our people to feel like I can talk to my team about the things that are going on with me. And so hopefully the team environment is creating a place where people feel comfortable talking about, well, if I'm struggling today. Today is not an okay day. If we think about the cumulative effect of what's been happening from a social perspective, I said diversity is a gift that keeps on giving. And Every day is a challenge sometimes. And so some days I'm not okay. And it would be great if someone asked you that question, we process that information, and then we adjust. We may not be able to talk today. And should that be okay? Yes, absolutely. And so our mental health is so important. And so what are we doing as far as also providing our folks with the tools that they need and the resources that they need? And we have to destigmatize it. And so we're making huge investments in, so people, if, for example, they need to speak to a therapist or whatever it is they need, we're making sure that there's greater access. And so with our medical coverages, right, how do you make this process easier? Where do you find the tools that you need?
Well, and another related thing is neurodiversity, which often people have found to be a great source of talent, innovation right now. Would love to hear some of your corporate efforts at KPMG around neurodiversity, and what are you seeing in terms of the trends in the industry overall?
Yeah, one of the things that we decided to do is hire an accessibility leader so that we are more focused on what we might be missing with respect to resources. Are we moving towards best in class, or are we compliant? I'd rather us be more going towards best in class. But again, I don't have the full breadth of what that might be. And so we are on the journey of making sure that we're in a better position to be more attractive to the neurodiverse community of talent.
Great. So before I move on to some of the interesting topics that I have in mind about hybrid work culture and how the pandemic has influenced some of the things that we are doing today, let me bring up an article, an opinion article that I read maybe a couple of weeks ago in New York Times, which was where the opinion was that corporations are spending billions of dollars through mandatory training for diversity. And the opinion in that expressed was that it is not clear whether that is in fact having a positive impact. And in fact, it suggested that mandatory diversity training may actually be backfiring and the impact may actually be negative. And on top of that, there was also an opinion made there that some diversity initiatives might actually worsen the DEI climates of the organizations that pay for them. And I want to hear your thoughts as Chief Diversity Officer on how do you respond to such opinion articles that kind of diminish the great efforts that we are making in DEI?
It does diminish, right? Because I think most people want to say it's one or the other. And I will say that diversity education and unconscious bias training alone is not sufficient, right? You can't just go to a training and saying, I've arrived and I'm done, right? So we all have to acknowledge that we all have bias, whether that's conscious bias or unconscious bias. And the more that you go through types of training to build your self-awareness on where you are, the better you will be. And so, but that is just like any muscle. You have to learn how to slow down your thinking when you're making decisions. Because if we think about it, we are on autopilot most days to get through the day. Think about how many decisions you've made just to get here today, right? As far as just the things that you do every step, we are performing that way. And so unless you slow down, you have no idea how fast you're going. And so what I will say is that the education and the training that we need to know about ourselves is also part of this. And so it's only one step. The other steps are, what are we doing throughout the organization around how we treat each other, and then also around our systems and processes that we know have to improve. So it's not the only solution, and I think that's where the argument is, yeah, one thing is not going to get you there. It's multiple things.
Okay. Great answer. Thank you. And so let me go back to what we have been experiencing as a community is this pandemic for the last few years, right? Maybe it's more into the third year now, if I'm right. One of the positives of the pandemic in terms from that perspective was the increased employment from folks who may have had different physical dimensions or mental ability. And telework certainly has empowered some of the employees who were needing that ADA accommodation. However, let me cite some of the things, some reports, and allow me to give you some statistics that you're probably very familiar with. Once the pandemic started, women accounted for 55% of overall net job loss. 56% of LGBTQ+ identifying survey respondents reported a loss of job or income. 47% of Black men reported that their sense of belonging at work is better remote than in person. And often we are finding that many folks who are in the underrepresented group or in some way who were impacted negatively like this are actually wanting to work from home for a variety of reasons, including sometimes the reason being that, I'm the only one who looks like me in the workplace, so I would rather be working from home than to deal with that. On the other side, there is a Stanford study which said that the remote work actually is exacerbating inequities. Out of mind, you're not going to get a promotion. You're not going to get the same level of, the merit, for example. And often, so these are two competing things. On one end, you would like the maximum productivity and you want to make it a fair and equitable system for allowing people to work in ways that they may be best suited for. On the other side, there is this idea that, if they are not there, they are going to lose out. So oftentimes the students, including my daughter, when she was working, I was telling her, you got to go to work if they give you a choice. Don't stay at home. Is that the right advice? And how do you handle these two very different competing things from a corporate perspective and a corporate lens?
I think the most important thing is communication. So you have to communicate. You need the individual professional communicating what they need. And then you also have the team. And we talked about the team concept, the people that you work with every day. How are we going to get the best out of us? And it's got to be an us. Because there's going to be trade-offs some days, right? There's just 5 days a week of us all being in an office, probably are gone for good, for the most part. But maybe on a given week, we all need to be here. And as long as we're communicating and having a conversation on what that means and the things that we're managing outside of the office, how does that play up, right? You have to have more conversation, ultimately. And so we have this effort called Flex with Purpose. If I'm going to go into an office or we're going in as a team, that we are going in together for a reason. And we have to make sure that that experience is the right experience. Because I don't want to go to the office every day and I'm sitting there by myself, and I'm on calls with other people that are in their homes. That's not the right use of any of our time, right? Because I could have a much better experience at my house if you're at your house. But if we're all there together for a common purpose, and we've agreed to that, I also will say that on that day that we're all coming to the office, that may be just the day that I have something with my daughter at school. So we have to create ways for, even if I have that and I can't be there, that I still am part of the conversation or I'm part of how we catch me up. Because there's going to be those circumstances where we're going to all be in and out. And that's why communication is so critical on the needs of both parties. And by that I mean the team party and the individual professional. So there is no single answer. Hybrid's here to stay. And I believe that the best out of both scenarios is us communicating more on what's the reasons for us to come together, and then what's the reasons for us when we'll stay at home. And sometimes that's also a negotiation that may not be perfect, but as long as we're communicating, I think we're going to get to better outcomes.
Awesome. So let me change gears just a little bit and talk about, all the efforts around DEI. In some sense, we are still understanding. We are not quite there yet, even in our full understanding and comprehension on the various aspects. On the other hand, we want to make sure that we are making progress as we go through some of these initiatives. So I want to hear from you, what is the North Star for corporations and for academic environments for that matter? What would be the North Star for DEI, and how does one measure that progress with the various initiatives? And what is KPMG doing?
So the North Star is us reaching some of the aspirations. So one of the things that we have made transparent to each and every person, and so we can send along our impact report, is where do we want to go? And so it details out some of our aspirational goals as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it talks about where we are the most underrepresented. And why we did that is because it was a way for us to show what we need to work on, and that it is not just one person's job, it is all of our jobs. And so part of our strategy is to make sure that we're really thinking about what else we could be doing. Our 5 priorities are grounded in how do we bring more talent to the organization, right? So it's talent acquisition and onboarding, making sure that we're a place where individuals want to come, build their career for the long term. And then once you're here, how do we make sure that we're onboarding and integrating you into this organization? So it's integration. And then once you are on board, how do we create a consistent experience for everyone, right? No 2 people that are starting at the same point should have vastly different experiences. So we are very intentional about making sure we develop a consistent experience. The third is engaging everyone. No one can say that they don't have a role to play in helping us be more inclusive. So where you are in the organization, we want to make sure it's everybody's job to feel that they're a part of that. We're doing that to try to build a pipeline at all levels. So we need more associates, we need more seniors, we need more people that wants to aspire potentially to partner or managing director, other roles in the organization. And we're trying to do that with a level of transparency, which is why I talked about the report. We deliver that every year so that we hold ourselves up to a mirror to see how we're doing and the ways of which we need to improve so that we can pivot, adjust our strategy. And then we're doing that with the level of accountability. We've asked everybody to include an IBO, an individual business objective, on what they're going to do to help us move the needle. So those are our 5 priorities, and they're grounded in how we think about the talent life cycle, how you get here, how you succeed here, and how you lead here. And that's not only in the organization, but also in the communities that we serve. So that's how we talk about this journey that we're on as an organization and hold ourselves accountable.
Very nicely said. In a few minutes, I'm going to start taking questions from the audience here who is present. If you want to ask a question, please go ahead and be close to that mic and stand in there so that I know how many questions I'm going to ask and how many questions the audience is going to ask based on that. So you were talking about transparency and accountability. So from that perspective, how often do you talk to a chief data officer, and how do you separate the idea of balancing transparency and data privacy?
So our information, I talked about the trust, right? How do we get our people to trust us more? Obviously, we're going to protect that information. We tell you how we're going to use it, if we use it, and all of that. So there are the appropriate caveats, but it will help us inform where we think we need to go with our strategy. So those data insights help us understand the temperature in the organization and what else we may not be thinking about. And so data provides knowledge. And so our data technology team helps us tremendously as we look at different ways that we are trying to move forward.
So, Elena, a lot of folks around the myriad of industry have been talking about this quiet quitting, right? And I think, and I'm wondering, is there this big relationship between DEI and engagement that you mentioned as one of the priorities that you were talking about? And how do you handle this quiet quitting and changing that?
I don't know if we all have the answer of what quiet quitting will be, but I know that what we're trying to strive for is how do you engage everyone to want to be a part of a purpose-driven, values-driven organization. And the more that people understand the journey and what we're trying to accomplish, the better off they'll be, hopefully, motivated to do parts of that work. And so that's part of the journey that we're on.
So in every one of these talks, I also like to be able to brag about our own School of Business and say we are number 3 in the US for diversity in our full-time MBA program. We are number 1 for the percentage of women in our full-time MBA program. And majority of our programs have majority women. So all of those are good characteristics. And the reason I say all this is because every time I hear from CEOs about the importance of DEI, I'm looking ahead and saying the boards of tomorrow are going to be much more diverse, and I need to make sure that the leaders that we are preparing for tomorrow's world are going to reflect those boards of tomorrow. So I want to understand from you what you are seeing as the latest trends for the board demographics.
So I think something or an article I was reading this morning that female boards are at a whopping 10%. And I think that statistic has been in that under 10% for quite some time. So I've always been the type to say, I want to put myself out of work. So what I aspire as a working mom, I would love to do myself out of a job. That's how I've always lived and done this work. I don't think the work will be done by the time I'm ready to retire, or that my daughter is going to be in the workplace. But I work each and every day trying to help us get to that place. And so it's interesting that the numbers are not moving as quickly as we need them to, but we need to take advantage of the fact that ESG and the social part of organizations making this more of a priority, that has to continue. And so boards holding us accountable. They are diversifying in different ways. They're thinking about different roles that they can have on their board so that they can diversify quicker, and that is going to help. But the pace of change cannot slow down.
Great. Well, we do have one person who is ready to ask a question. Please do identify yourself and then please ask a question.
Hi, I'm Mary Catherine Chase. I work for the School of Business. And as we graduate every single class of students who are graduating with values in DEI, and they're interviewing with different companies like KPMG that share those values, what is the best way for them to express that in their resumes and their cover letters and their interviews so that firms like KPMG know that they share those same values and will help advance those missions when they arrive to work there?
I think having those examples of how they've lived the values is going to be really critical. So most of us do behavioral-based interviews. You ask questions about your past experience. Think about how that comes to life and what are the things that you're doing to bring that to life. And so you all probably have a lot more experience because at school you're doing a lot of group projects, you're interacting together, bringing together events like this. It was a community effort. So think about ways that you're leading on campus to bring some of that to your interviews. Thank you for the question.
Great. Next question.
Hi, Elena. On behalf of GW Women in Business, thank you for being here, speaking about your experience today. My question is, when it comes to your career in DE&I, what is the biggest risk you've taken and how did it play out?
Wow, the biggest risk. I think I've learned to not try to take it personal every day, because as much as one day you feel like you've made a difference, one email can tell you that you probably are missing something, or somebody believes that you've missed something. And so that this is a marathon and not a sprint, and that self-care is very important. I intentionally, when I go on vacation, I don't tell people what I do, because there's got to be moments where you turn it off. And so the self-care is very important. And if we think about me saying the gift that keeps on giving, it is a daily gift. And so as I talk about us being better humans, this work is not at the expense of any other group, but it feels that way because someone feels that in order for you or us to get, it's got to be the expense of something else, and it doesn't. It's not a zero-sum game, and so that would probably be the thing.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Hi, my name is Ben. I'm in the online MBA program. I was wondering, when I think about DEI things and DEI initiatives, it's always really easy for it feels really easy for those of us like in management positions or at the corporate level to talk about DEI values and talk about how to make the workplace more equitable. But I was curious how you, maybe personal experience at KPMG, how you get that to translate to like the boots on the ground people. Like if you worked at a big manufacturing firm, how do you get the people on get the DEI values to the people on the manufacturing floor, who probably are the people who are going to benefit the most from that getting better?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think a part of what we talked about earlier, Andrew, I know you're in the audience, and we talked about it this morning with some of our associates and asking what is it that you can do to help us move to be greater allies and more inclusive. And that is, how do you create that stickiness on the ground with your teams, the people that you work with every day? How do we make everybody feel like they belong? We can all do that. And so it's not, I think someone thinks it's going to be some big thing. It's everyday behaviors, treating everyone as if they're human and making sure that they feel included. That's going to make me feel like I want to dance and obviously produce the best product for you. Our people are our commodity. So we're people business, and that's part of it. And so how do you build relationships? When you think about who might be missing is one question that you can all think about. And if we're going to lunch, are we bringing everybody to lunch? Are we thinking about who's not saying anything on a call that we're on? If we're on video, if people don't feel comfortable speaking up or they naturally are quiet, how do we make this a chat question? Those are tangible things we can all do, right? And so how do you think about creating ways where everyone, if you're not hearing from them, question why? And figure out a way, even if that's talking to them offline. It's not calling them out, making them feel embarrassed. It's more of how, and on the side, can I say, well, how would you feel to be included? Like, what can we do? Or do you want to give me your feedback? Or how can I support you in some way? We all can do that. And I think it's not this big thing. It's everyday behaviors that we can all change.
Thank you. So let me follow up on that very differently. There were a couple of questions about people preparing for careers in places which are going to respect diversity and whatnot. But there are some people who are really champions of DEI, and they would like a career to be in a position to follow up in your footsteps, for example, to become Chief Diversity Officer. What are some of the things that they can be doing right now while they are in college or afterwards to prepare for a career in DEI?
To prepare well, I think every professional has to think about inclusive leadership. And so what are we going to do to upskill? What do I not know about myself in my interactions with others so that I can become a more inclusive leader? So that's a lot of self-work. Think about the biases that I talked about before. What are mine? How can I do better? What do I not know about? What other cultures, right? So there's classes that you can take. What is it that you're doing to, just as most of us we get ready for client visits. I tell our colleagues all the time, it's the same kind of preparation. How do I be a better teammate? We could all do that.
Mm-hmm. Great. Next question.
Hi, Elena. Thank you for coming, and thank you for such an insightful conversation. You spoke about individuals being intentional about how they show up, sharing their diverse experiences, and being open about what they need. In what ways does KPMG show up daily for employees, especially its diverse population, during times of heightened racial injustice and national agitation?
I think I'm hopeful that we show up in a good way, and my colleagues have to keep me honest here by talking about it, being able to talk to each other, creating the environment that we're not keeping these things outside the walls, and dealing with it. They're not comfortable conversations, but I also don't want you to wait for something outside for you to then ask me a question about that experience. So how do we create the environment where those become unfortunate events, but normal conversations? That's the balance, or where we're trying to evolve to. And I hope that we're building that kind of culture each and every day. Thank you for your question.
Hi, Elena. Again, thank you so much for being here as the Chief Diversity Officer of George Washington University School of Business, and also running this event together as Diversity and Allyship Week. I know we talk a lot about DEI, but as we all get together, we understand the importance of allyship. And we emphasize this a lot less than the other parts of the DEI. So I would like you to share your views on allyship, which is an important component of why we have this week.
Yeah, I think we've been trying to extend our allyship efforts at the firm by we have our business resource groups, so we call them our BRGs at KPMG, and inviting people to become members, whether you're a part of that community or not. We also have our culture champions that are helping us with our teams to create that environment, again, the best of us as an organization. So encouraging people to be a part of that, but like I said, a core tenet of our strategy is that everybody's on the hook for helping us engage. So engaging everyone, I would say, is the cornerstone of how we become better allies for each other.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Jared Bolton. I'm in the online MBA program, and I'm also, funny enough, in the campus recruiting world. So I kind of see a lot of some of what you're talking about playing out in my everyday life. And one thing that, in particular, that I constantly I'm not necessarily battling with, but wondering kind of what we're trending towards, and I would love to get your opinion on, is this idea of like authenticity versus acceptance or professionalism. We tell students every day, hey, bring your whole self. We really want to learn about you. Tell us about all the depth and breadth of who you are. But at what point does that drift from authenticity to being a little bit more unprofessional? And so I have students ask me questions like, I have blue hair. Is that going to impact me in my interview? I have piercings. Should I take them out? Things like that. And I always obviously encourage them to do what they feel comfortable with and ultimately prime my interviewers to be conscious of some of those biases that they may hold. But in terms of what you're doing and the work at KPMG, I would just love to hear a little bit more about where you see that future going and some advice that you have.
I'll be honest, it's evolving, right? I remember, and again, I said this work has evolved. I remember one of my recruits asking me, he had cornrows in his hair, should he cut them? I remember telling him at the time, this was 20 plus years ago, that he should. Would I say that today? Probably not. But we've evolved in this space of diversity and our organizations have evolved. But that was 20 plus years ago. And so the concept of hair and who that is, that's part of your identity. I say bring it. Bring your best self to the interview and talk about parts and aspects of your identity who make you who you are. And so it is definitely evolving. But can I say, do I know how each and every person will receive it? Is the part that I also think is important. Because contextually, I don't know all the biases that the person on the other side of the interview, right? I'm hopeful that our organizations evolve to that. But that's not every organization. And so you have to really know the employer that you're going to, who you're interviewing with, and how comfortable they make you feel when you show up. Because that's how you're going to make the decisions that are right for you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Maricela Santos. I'm studying the full-time MBA program. I'm originally from Peru. Well, I'm the president of Prospanica, which is the club focused with Latinos and Hispanic. And I would like to know if KPMG are open to hire international students and special Latinos. Thank you.
Yes, we have a focus on Hispanic talent, Latino talent. Yes, absolutely. All talent, right? And so the first part of your question was, do we hire international students? Yes, so we have different sponsorship responsibilities, and that's not controlled by us, but by the US government on what we're allowed to hire, what level, what types of visas. So they're very specific to each of our groups. I will candidly share that there's more information on our website on the specifics by group. So again, there's a whole component of that. Absolutely welcome all talent. But we are restricted by the government, by what we can hire and what we can't, at what level. And so I think oftentimes people don't talk about that, but candidly, you asked me, can you talk, right? George, talk. So,
thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, we do have a lot of alumni at
Absolutely.
KPMG, and I think, I'm not sure she's going to be taking your resumes, but if you have them, go ahead and send them to me. I'll take care of them reaching KPMG as well. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Ms. Richards. Thank you so much for the insightful conversation. My name is Piwo, and I'm in the Capital Markets Program. I'm from South Africa. So what I would like to know is, so as a diversity and inclusion officer in your organization, who are you accountable to? Is it the leadership or the people?
I love that question. I'm responsible
I
to
told you
both.
the students will give the most difficult questions here, so.
It's to both. I report into our chair and CEO, Paul Knapp, and our board. And I believe I work every day for the 46,000 people that work at KPMG. Okay. So it's both.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for the question.
Well, thank you. I think you have answered a lot of questions, and it's been very interesting talking to you, but I want to ask one more question.
Oh, boy.
I mean, quite frankly, in your area, you get such a variety of questions. And yet, the conversation has such a breadth that there are so many other questions possible. I want to give you a chance to tell me, what is one question that you wish people would ask you, but they don't?
One question they ask that they don't.
What should I be asking you so that you can help make more reflection on that?
I think I come to these conversations, and I talked a little bit about it earlier, is to put yourself in a position where you're going to learn. So I'm not afraid to say I don't know the answer, right? Being vulnerable enough to say I know what I know, and I'll share that. And if I don't know, I'll go get it if I can, right? Mm-hmm. So being vulnerable enough to say, ask me anything, because that's how we learn. And ultimately, we have to put ourselves in a growth mindset to learn more. And again, as this gift of diversity keeps on giving, I'll continue to learn and grow. So.
Well, thank you very much. That's an excellent answer, and let's stop with that. Thank you very much. What an enjoyable conversation. I also want to thank all of you who joined us in person or online, and invite our students to the networking session with Elena and our alumni and professionals from KPMG. So please do join us after this. It's right outside in the lobby in the Jack Morton Auditorium immediately following this. And after we conclude here, I would like to announce our next guests on George Talks Business as a build-up to the GW Business and Policy Forum on Cybersecurity. Scott Smith, partner and principal at Ernst Young, and Brandon Wales, executive director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency and GW alum, will be on George Talks Business on February 23rd. And for those of you who do not know, the GW Business and Policy Forum on Cybersecurity, that's the big event on April 25th. I look forward to this conversation as a build-up to that forum and hope to see you all then. Thank you very much again.